Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and we got another solo album review of the newest project from Charli XCX, CRASH. In 2020, Charli XCX made the offhand comment of, "I'm interested in the concept of selling out." Now, she wouldn't be the first to have that sentiment. There's been more than a few acts in the counterculture who even purposefully indulge in popularity before making a conscious choice to swivel out of it. But let's be real, this is 2022. Poptimism's in full swing. What would even selling out look like for Charli XCX, who started off her career making electro-pop bangers and providing a hook to Iggy Azalea for a song that went to #1? Well, it's a bit of a misnomer, and it doesn't quite fully capture where Charli XCX has even been the past 7 or 8 years. Yeah, she's always been a major label act, but her genre swerve into the blown-out, glassy tones of hyperpop, it changed how a lot of folks perceived her music and her career, winning a lot of critical acclaim and a die-hard, extremely online fan base along the way. And I actually talked about this balancing act, her instincts, conventional and otherwise, when I reviewed Charli back in 2019 after seeing her at a festival, where she was trying to marry both approaches and it just never quite coalesced, either on record or live. And I think that's been frustrating for everyone involved, from the label down to Charli XCX herself. So when I hear the phrase, "I'm interested in the concept of selling out," you can tell it's more about her diving full force into her more conventional pop side, playing the game all the way down, maybe being a little cheeky or self-aware about it and seeing what might actually happen, be it the over-the-top pop star that Atlantic has been wanting this entire time, even if it might come at the expense of the hyperpop elements that have not quite permeated the mainstream market as much as one might expect. And you know, while I can see that being polarizing to a fan base who really got on board because of all the unique hyperpop stylism, I gotta be honest, I did not hate this idea. I've always been kind of mixed on Charli XCX within that style of production, which over the course of multiple mixtapes and albums, it's always felt kind of hit and miss to me. And for that last album on her major label, where she likely still has some of those connections to big name producers, why not try to make that retro pop album that bangs all the way through, even if it winds up being a little less experimental? And come on, this is her last album on Atlantic. I can't imagine she's gonna re-sign in another major. She's likely gonna go full indie and full hyperpop all the way down. This is likely a detour at most. I wouldn't be surprised if we got new music this year. So yeah, even despite the mess that comes with lukewarm to outright hostility online in the response to this album, and nobody's been handling this well for the record, I really tried to go into this with an open mind. How'd that go? Well, turns out pretty well. And I think it places me in a weird position with respect to the divisions in the fandom this album caused. On the one hand, even if I've got odd opinions about Charli's material and have for nearly a decade now, I still think my favorite song of hers is Need Your Love, a deep cut off of Sucker. I'd argue that this album is a fair bit better than a fair few people will give it credit, especially when it's trying to do in the explosively odd final chapter from Atlantic. But on the other hand, it's not a great album either. I know I'm in the minority of thinking that Charli XCX doesn't have one consistently all the way through, but while some of her issues have persisted, CRASH swaps out some of the textural problems that I used to have with issues that feel more structural, and that seems like a deeper concern that's worth examining. So yes, this is still very good, but still not great either. But alright, let's get the obvious out of the way first. In terms of lyrical punch or flair, Charli XCX has never impressed me all that much, and CRASH certainly doesn't change that. It's the expected pop framework of yearning love songs, relationship drama, and as expected for an album really trying to work on that meta text of this being the final album with Atlantic, a lot of explosive breakup songs. I do appreciate that there are plenty of moments where she questions this exodus of a relationship that she knows is likely quite bad, but almost has an irresistible tug, almost like her passing flirtations with selling out, as I previously mentioned. So okay, the framing's got some nuance, it's solid, and I like how she ultimately does get away, questioning that final leap before realizing, don't think twice, and she dives straight in. And there's a fair few few cute moments along the way. The conflicted wistfulness of new shapes, the exasperation at herself on good ones that later extends to someone who never takes the leap for her on constant repeat, the cheating scenes on every rule, even the lighthearted embarrassment of the love-feeling kind of reel on Yuck. It had some decent charm to it, and the metatext is kind of fascinating. But that being said, if you're looking for the standout lyrical moments or the stylized poetry that's rooted more in hyperpop of the past couple albums, well, no, it's not here, and it could feel like something is missing or more basic. I disagree, as a lot of that always felt like genre window dressing that didn't add much for me, but if you are missing it, I mean, I get it. Hell, it's hard to avoid the feeling that there is something that's missing from Crash as a whole, which is where we have to talk about the structural problems. All these songs feel abbreviated at best, or just outright missing a proper ending at their worst. The album feels short as it is, so when so many of the songs clock out a lot quicker than you would expect after just 2 verses and often no bridge, it leaves you wondering if a lot of good ideas were blown through fast and just in order to finish it and get it out the door. And I'm not sure that really helps the album feel as explosive of a finale as Charli's previous projects. Not only does it feel more conventional, but the impact of the bangers might not go as hard as some might expect. And sure, a TikTok economy, you can say a lot for brevity, but considering how much Charli XCX is pulling on the sound palette of late 80s synthpop and late 90s dance pop, compressing the scale feels like a bit of a misstep, especially as someone who is familiar with these tones or when she outright uses samples. Take Used to Know Me, with the slick pulsating house vibe courtesy of the Robin S sample of Show Me Love. I mean, come on, not only is that sample really overused, but the song locks into second gear and never lets Charli XCX push any harder. This is also an issue that I brought up in my song review of the 90s electronic elements of Beg For You with Rina Sawayama. Or for as how much as Good Ones is going for a Eurythmics vibe, it just feels weirdly short, as does Constant Repeat. And the most glaring example is You Have Twice is the closer that integrates a key change, has you expecting a real final hook to drive it out of the park, and it never comes. And for an album that's trying to crash out with a real bang, I don't know, maybe a little bit more excess was needed? And that's kind of frustrating, because when it comes to melodic composition and how much Charli XCX is really leaning into the dance floor diva vamping, I think this album feels as sharp and refined as ever, where even A.G. Cook and One of Trick's Point Never don't feel out of place in the sleek pop construct. Yes, it's less hyperpop on a textural level, but that also allows the bass grooves to really pop out in a way that they just didn't before. Hell, when the title track started to go off full New Jack Swing, I was entirely on board, especially as Charli XCX is gonna ram it through with as many creaking synths and that warped guitar that make it sound fresh and modern and decidedly hers. Similar case for Baby with all the new wave touches, or how Lightning goes all in with the vocoders and that balance of smolder that later drops in an acoustic interlude. It's weird, but it works for her. And easily my favorite song here was New Shapes, half because Charli XCX has great chemistry with everyone involved, but also because with the verses from both Christine the Queens and Carolyn Polachek, the song actually feels fully formed, even if my strongest emotion coming out away from that song is a yearning for that next Carolyn Polachek album and praying that it's not just going to be a lot of copies of Bunny as a Rider. Now, if you've played out with all this sort of idea of 80s nostalgia at this point in 2022, I mean, I get that as well. The decade's been long overexposed, and I would also argue Charli doesn't make the most of the bigness of that sound, which could be a natural fit for her more piercing vocal tone, especially with any auto-tune. Hell, you could argue that all she's doing here is paying tribute, and there's not a song here that comes close to matching the past. Now, my response to that's twofold. Number one, you're likely misremembering how well some of those albums have aged, because outside of the big singles, it can get very shaky. But two, maybe it's just as someone with much lower expectations for Charli XCX as a whole, but minus the hyperpop gloss, Charli proves that she could have competed in any of these eras, with sharp production, solid hooks all around, and have this level of versatility that feels cohesive. That's impressive to me. Now again, I don't think this is great, but again, I wasn't expecting great. And the fact that the compositions pop off as much as they do away from all the gloss and hyperpop artifice, it's a testament to rock-solid fundamentals, good melodies, and a presence that has picked up a lot more refinement, expressiveness, and flair as the decade's gone on. The Charli XCX of True Romance or Sucker could not have made this album. There has been growth. And while there's a few cuts that'll likely wind up feeling a little bit dated to 2022, Move Me probably sounds the most contemporary, and it's probably the least notable or likable in the execution. But I'm also aware this is transitional. It's an abortive exit strategy that was built most to satisfy contract obligations. The fact that there's consistent quality at all, that might be the real surprise. But also, again, I've had weird opinions on Charli XCX for about 10 years now. But I think the backlash could afford to fade a little for an album that is better than a fair many people are giving it credit. It's solid pop music. It might not have the flash that some of y'all might be used to, but it feels more groove-driven and consistent for it. I will take this. Good stuff. If you haven't heard it, give it a chance. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be very grateful. I gotta be honest, I'm not quite sure where this review is gonna fall in the continuity with things. I know some diehard fans are over the moon, but I also saw a significant amount of backlash, and there's some critics that have been really split on this too, where me coming up being in the middle saying, yeah, it's good, but not great. I don't know how that's gonna go over. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in the scheduling process, help support the channel, maybe get some albums on my schedule, or just argue with me on my Discord, link to my Patreon right over there. Don't feel obligated, but if you want to, options available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.